Hey Sopranos fans, welcome to another episode here on Bully Whispers, and we are here today to evaluate Law 20 of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, Do Not Commit to Anyone, in the TV show The Sopranos. Now, this may seem like a weird law by which to evaluate a bunch of guys who've committed their lives to the mob.
Whatever you say, T. I'd follow you into the gates of hell.
However, since most of them seem to take their oaths about as seriously as Tony took his wedding vows,
you've had quite a time on my watch. The preschool assistant, the weightlifter.
So I'm coming day and night. I mean, it's terrific.
this might be more applicable than you think. So in this episode, we will evaluate Law 20 in The Sopranos by first taking a second to look at the two main justifications behind the law in general, as shown through Jackie Jr., before moving on to a more in-depth look focusing on Tony during New York's internal struggle and how he handled it, as well as some of the more detailed aspects of Law 20, which are shown quite clearly from this point forward through Tony, Johnny Sack, Phil Leotardo, Little Carmine, Tony B, and Vito. This law is divided into two parts, with each explaining a reason to avoid commitments. The first is that it leaves you open to multiple suitors, which only increases your value, and this is where we run into Jackie Jr.'s ill-fated attempt to rob the card game. In this instance, the goal that Jackie Jr. was trying to accomplish,
we pull this off. We're like free agents. We dictate the terms, not them.
falls right in line with that aspect of the law, although even if they had pulled it off successfully, I don't think they would have had as much leverage as Jackie Jr. seems to think. Of course, it didn't go smoothly, and we won't go into that too much because it'll go too far off topic. However, one of the smaller aspects that determine Jackie Jr.'s fate should be noted because it offers a slight glimpse into the second reason to avoid commitment, and that is the conflict between Tony and Ralph Cifaretto. According to Greene, avoiding commitment allows you to stay above the fray. When you commit to someone, their interests become your interests, their problems become your problems, etc. The fact that Jackie Jr. was somewhat aligned with Ralphie, combined with the fact that it was his card game, ended up leaving Jackie Jr.'s fate in Ralphie's hands, and although I don't think Jackie Jr. stood much of a chance of survival to begin with, any small chance he may have had was eliminated due to the pressure Ralph felt from his tensions with Tony. Ralphie's problems had become Jackie Jr.'s problems, and Jackie Jr. had become Ralph's. The problems that may arise from this dynamic of unrelated yet interrelated tensions, especially when dealing with more powerful people, is exactly why Tony wanted to stay neutral in the struggle for control of New York. Shortly after the conflict between Johnny Sack and Lil Carmine began, the New York and New Jersey guys were sitting around talking when Tony became annoyed with Christopher for continuing the conversation down that path and tries to stop him by asking for a piece of bread.
I had no idea you guys were that close.
Close. We were like brothers.
It's a shame then you can't find a way to work things out.
Give me a piece of bread, huh?
But Chris is oblivious and continues forward anyways. Quick side note, I love the look Tony is about to give Vito when he tries to hand over the bread as if that's actually what he wanted.
Have you thought about this? Maybe you let him keep Lorraine, and you take a bigger piece of his Florida shit, the clubs.
Of course, Johnny Sack gets infuriated, storms out, and Tony breaks it down for Christopher during the car ride back. According to Greene, in conflicts such as this, most people's natural reaction is just to join up with whichever side is stronger, but this isn't a good idea. Good fortune is fickle, and like Robert Greene and Paulie Walnuts both say almost word for word the same,
Nobody knows what the future holds, my friend.
and Tony understands this.
The odds are that Johnny will end up on top, but who knows?
Furthering on this idea, Greene notes that the cunning can use their neutrality to put themselves in a position to mediate a peace agreement that is in their own best interests, or to capitalize off the combatants' now weakened states.
They fight, we pick up any crumbs from the fallout.
The key to making this work is to make sure that both sides feel that you are taking a genuine interest in their cause without the other side thinking that you are favoring them. And in that regard, Tony handled New York's war for control very well. Let's examine. As Greene notes, any new ally creates a potential new enemy, and had Tony just outright sided with Johnny Sack, his relationship with Little Carmine would have been permanently diminished. Now, while this may not have seemed too bad at the time, since Johnny Sack came out on top, nobody knows what the future holds, and had Tony dismissed Little Carmine, it's unlikely he would have helped broker a peace in the New York-New Jersey War. Instead, Tony handled it in a way that left him on very good terms with Little Carmine, which was enough for Johnny Sack to notice and get irritated by.
I'll tell you something else. In large measure, I blame you for this shit with Little Carmine.
The fuck did I do?
Illegitimized.
but not enough for him to feel like Tony sided with little Carmine and ruined their relationship moving forward. The fact that Tony was successful in this endeavor is actually surprising because, according to Greene, the people who are best at this are the people who can control their emotions, which Tony is not. Unfortunately for Tony, one of the reasons Greene argues against commitments even if you can control your emotions is because you can't control those of the people around you, which he finds out the hard way with his cousin Tony B. Now, this is a problem that popped up during the War for Control of New York.
I am bending over backwards trying to stay neutral. Paying for fucking car seats. And you're out there acting like a fucking free agent.
And looked like it was going to be a big issue, but Tony seemingly put aside his commitment to his cousin and killed him in an effort to ease tension. Quick side note, Tony's commitment to Tony B was based on obligation, which we aren't going to get into on this episode, but will be touched on in the upcoming 48 Legs of Dr. Melfi episode. Anyways, I say seemingly because he only partially put it aside. Had he completely set it aside, he would have handed his cousin over to Phil, but he didn't want to see him tortured, so he gave him a quick death. Now, at the time, while New York might have found it irritating, it was enough to ease the tensions and move forward in a profitable manner. However, as previously mentioned, nobody knows what the future will hold, and eventually Phil Leotardo becomes boss, which is bad for Tony because they already have a rocky relationship. Had Tony handed his cousin over to Phil, the whole dynamic of their relationship would have been different, and let me know down in the comments if you think that may have played a difference in the war to come. But, as it was, Tony didn't hand over his cousin, and after a series of events resulting from Vito's outing, Tony finds himself in a war in which he can't remain neutral. Fortunately for Tony, he was still on good terms with little Carmine, who helped successfully broker a deal, which is surprising considering how counterproductive his help usually is.
Your brother Billy, whatever happened there?
All right then.
Whatever happened there?
The shooting.
Whatever happened there?
It's at this point that I must take a second to address the theory that little Carmine is actually a genius, which I don't buy into, and I explain why in my Machiavellian episode on him, but assuming he is, he follows this law brilliantly. The truly advanced when it comes to the strategy of neutrality will actively instigate fights between others to put themselves in a better position, which is exactly what he would have been doing after deciding not to take on Johnny Sack directly. Lastly, before we go, I'm going to take a second to address the reversal of Law 20. According to Greene, one of the few times it's advantageous to commit is when you have to do so for appearance sake, and appearance is very important in the mob and in the Sopranos. Well, thanks for watching this episode here on Bully Whispers. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.